I'm really excited to show you this garden. It is one of my favorites anywhere, and I've heard people call it the most beautiful garden in Concord. Others, the most conquered garden in Concord, which I think is really apt. So let's be on the lookout for what makes that so. A number of special things to think about that you'll see. And it's an amazing site, and I'm just going to leave that as a surprise for us when we go around the house. It's a really, really vital garden. The owners have been here for 40 years. They do all of it themselves. It's in a very rich site. It's in this. It's along the Sudbury River, so it's in the 10-year floodplain, so the soil is really enriched by that, over millennia. The only other thing they bring in, they use their own compost. There's compost everywhere, is composted manure from Great Brook. So very, very rich and abundant. And so that abundance is, it produces a lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables. There are flowers everywhere. It's a wonderful place for pets. There's great spots for wildlife, and all grows well here, including children. They've raised 3 here, and now they have 7 grandchildren who enjoy the property. So also some wonderful historic notes. It's an 1898 house, Federal Revival. There very, very few of those in Concord, which makes this special. The integration of the house and the garden and the site is stunning. So we'll look at that, and just so much to see. So come along with me, we'll begin to take a look. We're going under this beautiful lilac. All along this fence are lilac trees, Japanese lilac trees, which are late blooming. You'll see they are just about to come out, which is so wonderful to have something. There's so much fragrance in the garden in spring, but a lilac tree will bring in that color and fragrance, into July when there's less of that kind of thing. In this area, this is the northwest side of the house, a darker side of the house. It used to be the back of the house. When the road was put in, it was reoriented. So this is now their entrance. They're very subtle and sweet entrance. And along either side there are a lot of native plants. Everywhere you look, it's fascinating. There are so many things that I could point out, but I think we need to come back to see what all of that is. There's gallium, all kinds of natives. And then along here, I just love these 2 different kinds of allium, this, and then this. This is a fascinating one. This is allium. It looks a bit like a fritillaria. It's weird and wonderful, and really they're fascinating plants in this garden. This garden welcomes the fascinating, it's a little bit eccentric, it's aesthetically really tuned up. Wonderful magnolia right here. And then you'll see through the garden, this is a vigorous garden. There is so much to do, just the owners working on the whole thing. But there's wonderful places for repose too. And I love seeing that balance in the garden so that you can do it all. It's also vigorous. And then you can sit down along the way and really enjoy your garden and get into the scents and sights and what you hear. Even this morning, I'm hearing the breeze through the trees. This garden's so rich. There's a lot of bird life here. Just little things tucked here and there, a rose. And can you see the bird bath down below it? Lots of things to explore. This wonderful old brick path. That's a greenhouse that was put in just 5 years ago. And it's a great place to be in the winter. And the plants love it, of course, but it's a wonderful place for the animals to go, for us to go. And the owner's mother had a greenhouse that was set apart from the house. And one winter, without the heat, she lost all the plants. So this one they built attached to the house, but it also is so wonderful to just have its outdoor feeling spill into the house and just be able to wander out there. Very special. And so I don't know, I just want to bring your attention to this really lovely entrance with its old bell, perhaps the original bell right here, and the boot scraper down there. I mean, so many details. This wonderful old watering can. I could just look and look, and I hope you will with me too. Let's head out this way. I mean, past there's Aqualigia, there's all kinds of things. Sedum, I see a phlox coming up here. It's a lot of things, and somehow it all hangs together. I think they all are interesting. They're all making their aesthetic contribution. Nothing is too planned, but there is some vision for it because of the way it just looks. So I want you to see no mulch anywhere in this garden except what the pine needles provide, and all that allows plenty of space for some self-seeders, some wonderful annuals tucked in. The gardens are packed, so there's less space for the weeds. I think it's a really interesting look and a neat approach not to bring in all those things from the outside, to use what you have in your garden. And this is another cool thing, and I think applicable to all of our gardens. This is something that, it's an annual, so something that Ginny just saw in the nursery, thought it looked great, and would bring these nice bright spots into the garden where it's a little darker over on this side. It's called angel wings, but you don't have to remember that because it could be any kind of annual. She bought a lot of them so that they're repeated through the garden, and that's an element that can help tie a big garden together as well, just in places she feels like she wants a little highlight or a little tie-in. Look at these. So we've seen a few kinds of allium. This is another weird and wonderful allium. They're such great plants, and this sort of eccentric one fits in with the garden so well. So here we are. So the owner, pretty soon after they moved here, built this tree house, this platform for his children, his 3 girls. And they used it a lot, and now it's really enjoyed by the 6 grandchildren who are big enough to use it. But it also is a spectacular spot for gin and tonics. So the adults love that spot too. It has this gorgeous view of the Sudbury River. So we're gonna walk along and catch another view of the river. And now we're heading up to this wonderful big view. I mean, I even like through this white pine, it just places you. We're definitely in New England with the white pines and oaks soaring up everywhere. Past these clivia that are on their vacation from the greenhouse, into this wonderful spot. I mean, I guess I'll turn around and look at the house first, that great wisteria growing up, and a wonderful place of repose right here. But wow, look with me out at what is beyond. And we have this magnificent garden, this wonderful, abundant garden that spills right down to a big vegetable garden, really sort of handsomely fenced in there, a cunning garden. That piece, that's all land trust, Concord Land Trust, that big meadow that goes right down to a long, long view of the Sudbury River. We're right at the bend of the Sudbury River, which allows you to see up the river. I mean, for people like me who love water, this is just heaven. And there is so much here. I mean, at spots like this is where I really think of that phrase. The fullness thereof. I mean, that is part of the 24th Psalm. And, but when I see things like this, so vital, so full of life, that's the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. That's what I think about. Not so much a religious, but more like maybe the transcendental idea. This is just so divine. So glad to have you here with me. Let's take a closer look and let's talk about the bones of the garden as well. So I want to tell you a little bit about the bones of this garden because they're actually really important. This house, I think I told you, was built in 1898. Went through a couple of families, and then there was a widow living here who married money, and that enabled quite a magnificent thing to happen. First, what she did was hire Fletcher Steele, who was really the preeminent landscape architect in this country in, I guess, arguably, but in the 20s and 30s. He designed the gardens at Namkeg, and this was his smallest commission. But boy, did he do something fabulous here. And there's a bit more about him. He was really the bridge between Olmsted, Frederick Law Olmsted, and who designed Central Park and the Emerald Necklace here. And because he was taught by Olmsted, and then he taught landscape architects like Dan Kiley, so the real modernists. And so he was a teacher and innovator and really an important driver in landscape architecture in this country. So here we have one of his works in Concord. What you'll see, what I think maybe attracted him to the site and what he did here was he was always looking for places with a big hillside that could spill down to a long view. And we certainly have that here. And then he also loved incorporating water. Well, of course, you have the river out there, a big piece of water. But what you also have, and we'll see as we go through the gardens, is this network of piping that goes through all of the terracing. So there is a trickle of water and bird baths everywhere. So imagine on a hot summer without air conditioning, which we actually are having right now, experiencing that. When I've gone into the garden in summer, it just is so cooling and stimulating to hear that water. There's a great little fish pond built into the terrace. He brings water right up to the house. And then a lovely, lovely fountain at the end of this lawn, which was put in for lawn bowling. So the ladies would sit over here on the steps, these gracious steps, and watch the gentlemen play along here, of course, with that magnificent view in the background. What a wonderful thought of what was happening here in the 20s, 30s, and onward. Let's go along this way and look at one of those water features. As we're passing the garden, I'll show you a few things here as well. Here again, this is an example of where she's tucked in an angel wing to bring some of that continuity through the garden. This is an interesting plant, as so many of these are. This is a gas plant. So gas plants, I just want to tell you about this because it's quite an old-fashioned plant. You don't see it in gardens very much anymore, but it's so interesting. It produces a vapor on hot, still days, like today, that is actually flammable. So they can even spontaneously combust. I don't think that's ever happened here. It's such a big, handsome specimen. And you'll see another one down there, that beautiful mauve. That's the biggest gas plant I've ever seen. Just neat to get an old plant into these old bones. Gorgeous poppies here. I mean, exotic, right? It's natural, but they're just so stunning, very sort of 30s looking to me. And more of these interesting allium, like not classic garden beauty, just deeply interesting. I mean, to me, more like maybe fine art than design. They have that little bit of ugly beautiful, which just is so attractive to me. I love our lady's mantle that pops up everywhere. There's some beautiful European ginger here, which we'll see throughout. And then again, these inhabitants of the greenhouse that are out here on their summer vacation. Wow, some really nice scented geraniums. So you can see how Fletcher Steele brought water right up to the house. I mean, there's this wonderful fish pond here, surrounded by all these plants who are all taking their summer vacation from the greenhouse. Just makes it also feel so exotic and so layered against this federal house, then the 20s landscape, then all of these guys from somewhere else in the world. There's a really rich quality here. I mean, having water so close to the house also brings a lot of interest. There's so much cover in this landscape that a fox will come up and drink at this pool. They've had great blue heron land right here. It just is a wonderful connection to get water not just out there, so spectacular looking up the river, but also a trickle of water here, just almost in the house. It's so close. Then let's go down and look at another water feature. This wonderful pool, cooling pool at the terminus of this expanse, built for lawn bowling originally. Again, a lovely, just so quiet fountain. This nymph has been in the owner's family for quite a while, maybe 100 years, her grandparents, and then it was at her uncle's, then it came here. And then they found that lovely shell with just that wonderful trickle, which spills down into this quiet pond. I mean, everything, there's wonderful imperfection here, and just makes it just fills my senses. European ginger all around, ferns, this beautiful tree arching over, very special place. So let's head out into the brightness again, into the garden. Oh gosh, I can barely walk by without talking about this and that. This is, I think, a Korean spice viburnum, very, very, very fragrant in the spring. There are just so many layers of things to look at here and think about how they transition as the year goes along. So let's take a closer look at these wonderful perennial beds, terraced with this old original terracing. It's just with the view beyond. There's a lot to show you along here. Besides individual plants, interesting plants. I mean, I'd love looking across something like this, a desert plant. I love it when things hang together like the white pines in Concord, but I also love, as you know, contrast. So seeing something like this against a Concord landscape, it's jarring, but in a wonderful way. This beautiful salvia down below. Everything just nestled in, no mulch. It just spills from the garden, then onto the grass, and the grass has plants in it too, and it's just all so beautifully, loosely interwoven. Handsome boxwood, giving some real punctuation to the space. Wonderful geranium. I think that's a New Hampshire geranium there. Coral bell. I mean, classic, a lot of spires, these foxgloves. And this is a site and a house that just goes up the house and these great pine trees. And I love how that has echoed in the choice of garden plants. So many of them with these great spires. I mean, I just love this gentleness of maidenhair fern. This is a wonderful stand of that. And gosh, let's not go too far without looking up at that night blooming cereus. So that is a spectacular plant, very unusual. It blooms only at night, and each bloom only one time. What will happen is the owner will call you and say, do you want to come at 10 p.m. or do you want to come at 7 a.m. so that you can see this one-time bloom? And it opens up to a white dinner plate shaped bloom that is extremely fragrant. And it just feels, it's so heady. It's so, for me, somehow 1930s. It's very, very exotic in an old-fashioned kind of way. So as we go along, I mean, you'll see these old original steps that the owner, I mean, he uncovered all of this. This was all covered with poison ivy, rose brambles, just buried when they moved in 40 years ago. And that very first summer, with small children, a big job, somehow he managed to clear all this space and uncover the bones of this wonderful landscape. Some things were lost, like this railing. So they found a Fletcher steel design and had it copied by an Acton bronze worker. And since then, over the years, a tree has fallen on it. So it's the graceful Fletcher steel design, but then touched by nature, touched by imperfection. And that just added another beautiful curve to it. I just love it, love that kind of thing. So you'll see as we come down, how the piping does bring water, all these many, many bird baths. And we'll come down here and we can see and experience the trickle. as everywhere, beautiful places to sit. Carefully sited, it wasn't just plopped down there. You have this wonderful vista across the garden up to the house, you know, and swinging around. It'll be all along here, but I want you to see and hear this trickle from one bird bath down this path, down the rock face, watering these wonderful self-seeders that have knit themselves into the rock. You see much more of that in England than you do here, and I just love it. And then down to this very gentle trickle right down to the ground. That just so cooling and evocative. So we'll go along more the base of this perennial garden, and looking up to the house, all so well integrated, I would say, these spires, these things that are heading up. Wonderful progression of plants in here, ones that just jump out a little bit, but I love the yellow. It's the complementary color of the purples, so it's different, but it belongs. I don't know if that's intuitive. It's something I would have to think about, but I think it may be intuitive here. I just heard a little rustle in there. I'm sure chipmunks along here. We had seen a bunny when we were here previously. Great place for animals. I mean, they love the water too. So again, just wow, this trickle. So great. We'll walk along here. There's some wonderful peonies here. That beautiful geranium, I think that's sanguinium. I love that gentle pink of the sanguinium. Phlox, I mean, so much that I can see coming along. Another phlox, so some repetition. I think this may be a plant called a zizia. If it's not, look up zizia. It's an interesting native, and I think an up-and-comer, so I will learn it by the next tour. And we go again, some nice repetition. It's sort of the way things would be in nature, and the way things happen with foxgloves. If they're happy, they will self-seed everywhere. So I think you may be picking up on some of the very magical qualities of this garden. I mean, certainly even being here as an adult, but imagine being a child in this garden. And there were 3 girls who grew up here. Each one had their own garden plot, but beyond that, the way a place like this can open your imagination with as we're seeing, all these nooks and crannies, all these fantasy areas, all of these different spots. And I know I've heard the 3 girls would go rolling down this hill and then go running up the sledding hill across the way, looking for the leprechauns. That's where the leprechauns lived. And last summer, in that different summer, all 6 grandchildren, now they're 7, but there were 6 then, came and spent time right here. And it was a lively place with the golfer's son-in-law hitting balls off that top step right over like this. And with the littles, what they would do, the owner told me, is the oldest, who's just 10, would gather all the others together and say, all the grandparents and parents have gone away on a big vacation. So let's go explore. Let's go make this our own. And imagine being small and having the run of this place. And this is just a great place for littles. As the owner said, no one wore clothes in the summer. And it has that sort of natural, welcoming, anything goes, let's just try it kind of feel. It is a garden for people to have great fun. We're coming down toward 2 paddle boards down here, just sitting there for the winter. I'm looking around to see, so this is a wonderful crab apple we're walking under. Some trees and things at all stages of their life. So as is this old apple kind of crumbling and reaching over the paddle boards. There's an elm tree right around here too, but it really is, it's the shell of an elm, and that died a long time ago. And but that makes a wonderful habitat for birds, certainly woodpeckers, insects. And then as it decays, it becomes part of the richness of the earth. It goes into this very, very rich and special acre. So let's tuck ourselves through this wonderful little passageway. Very natural, again, just a privet that's been let go to go and do its own thing, do what privets like to do. And back here, another pile of things from the garden, more decay, more places for habitats for animals, richness for all kinds of life, microorganisms right on up. And so beautiful in a spot like this, this nature's glory, this digitalis foxglove, foxglove just growing up right there. Oh, I wonder what they're starting there, something. And then this wonderful, really big reaching apple tree. I think this is Macintosh. They grow lots of different varieties and some really early ones, which is just fascinating. What a wonderful spot for the really littles, the bigs. Another place of repose. So there's all this vigorous life, fun, work, but plenty of time and space to really enjoy each other across the generations, long friendships. As we were going through, actually, this is another spot. They brought electricity down. It's actually right over there where they'll put a dance floor, jazz band from Lincoln, looking out over this magnificent meadow on a balmy evening. Imagine that. So they do have it set up to really gather people together for fun, for really living life. Let's head over to the vegetable garden. Here we are in an area that was Lake Sudbury. This was like 18,000 years ago. And under the glacier, then there was an ice dam that made this Lake Sudbury, expanded it through this whole area. That broke, again, like 15,000 years ago. So when it was a lake, there's a clay deposit from that lake about a foot down. But then there is a whole foot of really, really rich soil because we're in a floodplain, a 10-year floodplain. So every 10 years, the river comes all the way up and deposits layer after layer, and it's been millennia. So for Concord, which was quite, sandy soil, some poor soil, we have other areas like this in floodplains, but it's really great to be able to take advantage of something like this. And let's go into the garden. Let's go by way of this Rosa rugosa. There's scent everywhere, and places for bees. There are a lot of bees. There are hives, of course. There's all kinds of life here. So this enclosure, the husband really wanted a vegetable garden, and he wanted it right away. So after he cleared that slope, he talked to his mother-in-law, also a great gardener with a big vegetable garden herself. And she said, well, build it this high, sink the fence 1.5 feet down, really protect yourselves. And the neighbors were like, well, why do you need to do that? She was on Long Island where there was a big deer population then. At that time, there was really nothing to protect against. But now, of course, it's so great to have such a wonderfully protected vegetable garden. We're at the very beginnings. All of this, the full tapestry comes out in fall. It's so big and lush, provides so much. This time of year, you'll see this big run of asparagus along there. That's a lot of asparagus for 2 people to eat. And I hear they eat it every night for dinner for 6 weeks. So still a few left, but that's coming to an end. And wonderful squash. This great old trug right here with all the wonderful tools. I love the way they've used old logs and sticks to delineate the garden. Nothing too formal going on here. This wonderful hay underfoot, protection here. Ooh. And peas held up in the classic way I've seen in England, with these pea stakes. So just some, as you're pruning your apples in the spring, save some of the branches, and that, I think, holds up your peas in such an elegant, old-fashioned way. The glory of, this is spinach that has bolted. So cool to see that flower that one normally would never see. Roses, oh my gosh, look at that clematis. I mean, here we are in a garden, ostensibly a productive space. I mean, very, very productive, but that's not what it's all about. It's also about, beauty and discovery. So sure, let's head out this garden gate. I know the owner just put this in since the last time I visited last week. There's always something going on here, just so that we could get out the other side. And whoa, I just get captured by things like that rose, that form on that rose. Maybe a David Austin. I don't know, but it sure is. That flesh color, that peach color, that formation, beautiful. We'll head down. I think we'll come back and talk about these apple trees because I'm really excited to get you down to the river, and we'll do the flower bed at the same time when we come back. Look at the table just set up. Always projects, always things going in, but just so charming out here in the meadow. And with this peaceful hammock right out by the river, perfect spot. But 40 years is a lot of time to find where your wonderful places are, where you really want to take your rest. So you can take your time to do that in your own garden and then really enjoy it. Let's take a walk down to the river because I think it's very special just to feel connected to this important piece of water. Beautiful, but it's very important in Concord history. It's part of the reason we're here. It was so special that there was this confluence of the Concord and Sudbury River and the Assabet right here. So, but let's also enjoy it as we're heading under this bower, this old apple tree that is just growing so gracefully out, and the dappled light that's coming through, and the feeling of being enclosed, but having it so big, but also you just touch it. Everything you go by, you just want to touch and experience in this garden. So out in this meadow, this is, we're almost on land trust land. That's what all of that is. And this is a special meadow. It's really, really beneficial to pollinators. They mow it only once. Most meadows, I would say, are mowed twice during the year, but this one is allowed to grow up, and only at the end of the season is it mowed down. That means that the bees and all the beneficial insects have flowers out here, have things right through the summer. They're not taken away. We're going past actually a cold frame. It's so interesting to see some of the bones of that 1924 design. So Fletcher Steele put French drains throughout this whole meadow so that you could meander around it, so that it wasn't so wet. And they still exist, and many are still working. It's why we can walk out here. But this is a remnant of his original cold frame. That's a place you can start flowers and vegetables quite early. I mean, this would have had glass in it, which you open and close to regulate the temperature. But I love that. It's just a touch of what was, a little mark of history. So it's just walking out through this meadow, beginning to look back up at the house, at the apple trees, at this gorgeous, gorgeous steamy day. That beautiful bridge, very, very graceful. So across the way, so those are all silver maple. We've seen silver maple in one of the other gardens. Today, they look one way, but gosh, the silver maple, when the breeze blows, what silver maples do is they flutter and they show you the opposite side of their leaves, which are silver. So you get this just gorgeous flicker of silver. And that is that whole run. That is all silver maple. that's also quite a significant spot because it is where Henry Thoreau and his brother John launched their boat for their expedition up the Concord and Merrimack River. Now that trip was the basis and really the story of Thoreau's first significant book, the book he wrote while he was at Walden Pond, A Week on the Concord and Merrimack River. So deeply meaningful to me anyway, to see where that all began. We also, on the other side of those trees is Frank Sanborn's house, the important 19th century educator. So here we are, really deeply grounded in Concord, and just feels magnificent. So let's head out of this glorious meadow back up toward the house. Down at the foot of the hill, next to the vegetable garden, is this wonderful, wonderful cutting garden. I mean, some spots are subtle. As the summer goes on, a lot of these things will grow up, just like we've seen up at the main garden. And there's great scale, there's great interest. There's looking for some things that have some weirdness to them, like angelica. I just love that. You know, we'll go past again this Rosa rugosa, and down here comfrey, which is this beautiful blue, and it pairs so well with the peonies that we'll see all along here. It's an herb, and it's a very old-fashioned plant. You know, everything has a loose, welcoming quality to it. Things are just tucked in here among many self-seeders, a lot of asters in here. If the owner wants to put in a plant, she just clears a little spot and puts it right in among everything else. No big structure, and yet you can see again this repetition of lots of things that soar up. I mean, this is going to be the angelica. Very handsome, very big. There are a lot of big things around here that suit the site. Oh, and this one has a story. I mean, it's this wonderful Baptisia, an especially sinuous kind. And these were grown from seed that the owner picked up at her husband's 25th college reunion. These were growing in the Adams House garden. And now he is past his 50th reunion. So look at how they've done, look at how they've hung on. I mean, Baptisia is a very long-lived plant. It doesn't like to be moved. So it's great that she was able to establish it here, but now it's here. And what a wonderful pairing it is for these peonies that are all along here. And wow, they love this sun. And they make this beautiful leaf too, such a wonderful edge. You know, all of this is so wild. It's wonderful to have this structure, this run of a single thing right next to it. I mean, peonies are so luscious. Sorry, I'm touching them. I'm touching them all because they just smell so good. To me, they feel so good. They're so cooling on a hot day like today. And the various colors she has in here. And then the peas growing up behind. I mean, that is just, it's unusual. You know, this pairing of vegetables and flowers, I think, is a really lovely thing to think about. Because, there's a pea. It's just great to see always what is coming along here. And, tucked in here, some beautiful roses, a lot of asters. I think that I might see a delphinium in here. Wow. So a great big Nantucket daisy. And a beautiful little bird bath. Always things for the birds, always water in this garden. It's part of its fertility, I think, and that feeling of welcoming all. We all need water, so it's just everywhere. Lovely rose. I wish I could even tell you what this is. It's so, so handsome. Wait a minute, I know what it is. And again, things are let to do their own thing here, so sometimes they are a little unrecognizable to me. But this, and they're in funny places. This is, I think this is a rhubarb plant that has gone to seed. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, which I certainly might be, but look how handsome, look how unusual, magnificent, I think. Over here more, ooh, I think this is a bowl of beauty peony. Just loveliness all the way along. And here we have some raspberries. So wonderful things to taste, to smell. Yeah, and always things going on. Here's sort of the workings of this garden, this wheelbarrow full of things that were pulled up. I mean, as you look down the garden, there's a wonderful major wheeler, honeysuckle, again, tall, big. I mean, the owners are big and strong, and this garden really reflects that, as many gardens do. It's sort of like owners and their dogs sometimes. I love to look at who owns a garden and are there similarities in the way they dress or look. Yeah, some of this hay just getting ready to mulch into the garden, and that will decay and become part of the fertility of the soil in future years. We're passing through the fruit trees. I see a beautiful peach over there, a pear tree. This is one of the apple trees. I mean, when I was here in spring, the owner was way up this tree on a ladder way up, pruning this tree for his 40th season. Imagine that. So, but apple trees need that treatment. And I can see in the property they've experimented with different ways of pruning too. Some of them are quite flat. Some like this are allowed to grow up more openly. That's really neat. And these are older apples, like a Roxbury russet. And that was an original type of apple. So we could go into detail on the apples, but I want to get you on to see even more. This is their raspberry patch. This is an interesting thing with raspberries, which I've had too. You can prune them to bear fruit twice a year, which these do. You can see they're getting ready to have July fruit, and then it'll return in September. Their neighbors right over there have a raspberry patch they're treating differently. They're treating it, and that's what I did. If you cut it right all the way to the ground, it grows up and you have your one harvest in September. It's a bigger harvest in September, but it's quite fun to have raspberries earlier on in July. Again, like water everywhere. They have faucets. They have these wonderful old watering cans. And over here are the bees. They love their bees. And the bees are really important for the garden to pollinate, of course. And then the garden provides homes for the, provides food for the bees. And the bees are so important to us. So these are really active hives, and she's had them for years. So we saw this wonderful plant in another garden. It will open up and be strongly scented in later in June, July. It's the Calamacanthus, special, a native. I just love, I'm learning new things on this tour, and I hope you are too. So we'll head this way past. This is their big leaf and brush pile, but you've seen them everywhere. So of course it's full of life, microorganisms, all of that, but other things have found it and love it too, and they've planted around it. This is a plume poppy, Maclea. So it's an interesting plant. Again, I didn't know it before this garden, but wonderful leaf. Look at, that just feels like a work of art to me. And then it makes these tall spires of fluffiness further into the summer. Back of this pile is a big stand of mint juleps, they told me. And again, just life, vigor, repose, bounty, relaxation. It's pretty heavenly. We'll head past this. I'm just looking at this to see, this is a really handsome witch hazel. Witch hazel's a wonderful plant. Some of them are natives, and it blooms like February or March. Vibrant, different shades, but many of them vibrant yellow. And you'll think, wow, why is that forsythia coming up so soon. Well, it's not. It's a witch hazel. And to me, it's just quite magical and such a relief to gardeners to see some flower that early on. And often it's like yellow against the snow too, yellow against this expanse of snow. Imagine that at the base of this hill. So we will head up the hill. And when I see this, I just think of how fun it would be to roll down it. It's a perfect roll downhill. And as I'm walking up through this grass, I see this great diversity in the grass. Clover and violets and all sorts of things. You know, there's not too much grass in this yard, but where it is, it's diverse. It's a great sort of new lawn. And coming back up to this garden, hearing that wonderful little trickle of the Fletcher steel bones of the garden, the water coming down across the walls. Looking up at the details of that federal house. So as we head up here through this deeply shady, very cooling spot, again past that wonderful trickle, seeing the backside of our nymph right here. It's just glorious. And of course you can glimpse back over your shoulder and see what we've just been in. Just so great, right? Wow, well, what a pleasure it's been to be in this garden and to be here with you. It's so full of life, isn't it? It's just so rich and vigorous and peaceful and wonderful. I think it shares so many characteristics with Concord. That's what makes it truly a Concord garden, maybe the Concord garden in my mind. You know, the variety, the depth of history, the geologic history here, the water as our rivers come together, such a big piece of that. Such interest, such fascination everywhere you look. I mean, it's one of the things that makes me so excited to live in Concord, and I get the same feeling being right here. I hope you got some of that too.